Okay, let's unpack this. We live in a professional world that is, well, pretty obsessed with specialization, right?
Absolutely. It starts early.
Yeah. You pick a major, you enter a field, and the pressure's just constant. Find your niche, become the expert.
Go deep, really deep in one tiny sliver of things.
But history, philosophy, even modern strategy, they all ask this kind of difficult question.
What happens when that niche disappears or changes?
Exactly. What if the market shifts? Or technology just makes your specific skill obsolete overnight?
Or you suddenly need to solve a problem that, well, it sits at the intersection of 5 different fields.
Right. And suddenly that expertise you work so hard for, it can actually become a weakness, a blind spot.
Mm-hmm.
So our sources for this deep dive, I mean, they're pretty diverse. We've got ancient philosophy, military doctrine, cutting-edge tech management, business theory,
A real mix?
a real mix, and they all seem to point to this maybe surprising idea.
Yeah.
The incredible value of the generalist.
Yeah, the person with breadth.
So our mission today, really, is to synthesize these different fields. We want to explore why having that wide-angle view isn't just, a plan B.
It's maybe the essential thing.
It's essential for handling complexity, for driving real innovation. We're basically making the case for breadth as the foundation for, well, adaptable depth.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is that the generalist advantage, it's not about being a dilettante, someone who just knows a tiny bit about everything.
Right, it's not superficial.
No, it's more about being the system architect, the person who can see the underlying constants, the connections, the interconnectedness of systems.
That interconnectedness is key.
It is,
Yeah.
because the core challenge today, I mean, we're just drowning in information, aren't we? But we still need to understand the whole system.
Yeah, the big picture gets lost.
It does. And this is a problem Max Weber was wrestling with even way back in social science. He really stressed the need for scholars to develop generalized categories
Generalized category.
and adopt a functional point of view.
I think that's where people get tripped up. They hear functional and think, oh, technical details.
Right. But Weber meant something broader. He meant looking for the patterns, the functions across the system.
Not just the specific mechanics.
Precisely. Without that broad framework, all the variability we see in society and markets and tech it just looks random, utter chaos.
Impossible to predict anything.
Yeah. You can't work out any reliable patterns or predict change. You need that big net, that generalization to catch the fundamental patterns that let you make sense of it all.
And Peter Drucker, he took this kind of abstract idea and made it super practical for business.
He did. He pointed out that the really effective executives, they don't try to master juggling 50 different variables at once.
Because that's usually just sloppy thinking.
Or lack of focus, yeah. Instead, they relentlessly focus on finding what is strategic and generic.
Strategic and generic. Okay.
They look for the constants, the things that apply across different scenarios. That way, they avoid getting bogged down in, specialist weaknesses or just the daily grind of management efficiency.
So the generalist leader sees the details, but operates on the level of the principle, the constant.
Exactly. The
That
principle.
distinction feels really important. Operating at the level of principle versus detail. It sounds like the classic divide between management and leadership you hear about from people like Covey or Maxwell.
It absolutely is. Management is, well, it's about control, process, efficiency, rules, keeping the engine running day to day.
The grind.
The grind, yeah. But leadership, that requires stepping outside that whole paradigm.
You have to look up.
You have to look up. Focus on direction, purpose, culture building. These are big systemic issues.
They inherently demand that wide perspective.
Right. Understanding the environment, the future, how all the different pieces fit together. A narrow specialist stuck optimizing one silo, they just can't provide that system-level directional view. It's almost impossible.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. How does this wide-angle view actually form in the mind, this generalist mindset? It seems like it requires some specific mental work.
It really does. It's about moving beyond what you think you know, your assumptions, to actually see what's right there in front of you.
And maybe the best way to grasp this comes from, well, surprisingly, the arts.
Yeah, it's a bit ironic, isn't it? Ed Catmull at Pixar, he talked about this a lot. Moving from that general mental model to seeing the specific, he drew inspiration from basic art classes.
We've all felt this, I think. You try to draw something familiar, like, I don't know, a shoe or a chair.
Yep.
And your brain's general idea of chair just takes over. You end up drawing what your memory says should be there.
Instead of what you're actually looking at. The specific lines, the angles, the light.
And the result is usually pretty bad. Out of proportion, stiff, way too simple.
Exactly. So the trick for the artist, and this is the trick for the generalist too, is learning to suppress that internal shortcut, that labeling part of the brain.
The part that instantly says chair or I.
Right. Sometimes called the L mode, the verbal analytic side. You have to force yourself to see the pure shape, the relationships, without the label getting in the way.
That explains those weird art class exercises like drawing something upside down.
Classic technique. You draw a face upside down, and suddenly you can't rely on eye or nose. You're forced to just see lines and curves and shades.
It bypasses the label.
He bypasses the label. Or another one is focusing on the negative spaces.
Ah, the space around the object.
Exactly. The shapes the brain hasn't bothered to label or assign meaning to. By drawing the negative space accurately, the positive object often just appears correctly.
So the lesson is, seeing the whole, seeing accurately, requires a deliberately breaking free from your own assumptions, mental models.
Active mental separation, that's key.
And, this idea of separation before synthesis, it pops up way back in ancient Greek philosophy, too. Plato talked about the difference between sight and understanding.
He did. Sight, our immediate perception, it sees things like large and small, or light and dark as just a mixture. They're all jumbled together.
They just exist together.
Right. But understanding, the higher intellectual function, Plato said it compels us to first see large and small as separate concepts.
You have to conceptually pull them apart first.
You have to. You need that high-level conceptual breakdown, the generalist view, before you can truly synthesize and understand the specific reality of the mix you're actually seeing.
And Drucker pointed to this same intellectual separation as crucial for making those big strategic decisions.
Yeah, achieving that high-level conceptual understanding.
So if we bring this down to, say, leading a team, that intellectual separation is vital for figuring out the real problem, isn't it? Especially when things get messy.
Oh, absolutely. When a conversation is just swirling in chaos, everyone's using generalizations.
All the us and we talk that avoids anyone taking responsibility.
Or blaming they.
Exactly. The effective leader has to cut right through that noise.
No. Well, coaching experts talk about the focus question. You pivot from the general blame back to the individual. Ask something direct like, so what's the real challenge here for you?
Forcing that separation, making it personal and specific.
It forces them to separate their own actionable contribution from the vague group stuff.
And Ray Dalio, the investor, he's really strong on this too, right? Leaders need to be absolutely specific about problems.
Totally. He hates the anonymous we and they. He calls them linguistic shields.
Shields, I like that.
Because they mask personal responsibility and ownership. So the generalist leader, in a way, acts as the linguistic system integrator. They redirect focus back to the specific connection, stop the abstraction from killing any chance of action.
It's like Plato's abstract separation meeting Dalio's very concrete interpersonal reality.
That's a great way to put it.
What's really mind-bending, though, is how this ability to generalize seems to span everything, from the mundane, like team meetings, right up to the cosmic. It suggests some kind of universal pattern.
Ralph Waldo Emerson captured this so well when he talked about the highest minds.
What do you say?
He said they don't just see a single fact in isolation. They explore the manifold, meaning the rich, layered, comprehensive meaning of every single sensuous fact.
Manifold meaning, okay.
For Emerson, these minds see the river of time flowing from sources that are, in his words, intrinsically ideal and beautiful.
Wow.
And he uses this fantastic word. He says the different parts of life grow coetaneously.
Coetaneously, in the definition there.
Yeah, it means they grow concurrently at the same time, but kind of independently, like parallel tracks.
Okay, growing together but separately.
Right. And the generalist perspective holds those parallel tracks, those coetaneous parts, in mind, knowing, or maybe having faith, that they will eventually integrate, become members of a whole, obeying one overarching will or purpose.
So it's like seeing the underlying unity even in apparent separation.
It's the ultimate faith in system unification, recognizing that seemingly unrelated events or specialized functions aren't actually disconnected. They're just growing side by side, destined to interact down the line.
That's a powerful idea.
It is. And you find a remarkably similar push for this ultimate generalization, this unified view, in the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay, this sounds like it might get dense.
It does get philosophically deep, yeah. The Gita describes the complexity of existence through three huge manifestations that ideally need to be understood all at once. We should probably define them carefully.
Please do. Let's take our time here.
Okay. The first is adhibhuta. This is the physical realm, the material world. And its key characteristic is constant change.
Everything physical is always changing.
Always. It goes through 6 stages. It's born, it grows, it stays for a while, produces byproducts, then it dwindles, and finally it vanishes. Constant flux.
That sounds like a pretty stark reminder that focusing too much on just the material, just one specialty in the physical world, is inherently temporary because it's all fading.
That's a great takeaway from it. Then the second manifestation is adhidaiva.
Adhidaiva.
This is the governing power. Think of it as the universal form of the Supreme Lord, the cosmic order that governs everything, including all the demigods. It's the impersonal, grand structure of the universe.
So the ever-changing physical stuff and the unchanging cosmic structure behind it. What's the third?
The third is adhyaja, and this one is personal, intimate. It's the super soul, the Lord present within the heart of every single living being.
Wow. Okay, so you have the vast cosmic structure, adhidaiva, the constantly changing material world, adhibhuta, and the personal inner divine spark, adhyaja.
Exactly, all operating simultaneously.
That seems like a lot to hold in your head at once.
Yeah.
How does anyone, let alone a devotee, manage to grasp all three interacting systems together?
Well, the teaching in the Gita suggests that for the truly dedicated devotee, the one focused on Kustiya consciousness, the functions of these different levels, adhibita, adhidaiva, adhyaja, they actually become clarified automatically.
Through devotion.
Through that focused consciousness, the ultimate generalization in this view is recognizing the Supreme Lord as the single unified source of everything. Real knowledge transcends the constant churn of the material world, the modes of nature, Gopya Param, and lets you see the unified spiritual reality underneath.
So the generalist, whether they're facing a business problem or a deep philosophical question, is always looking for that unifying principle.
I think so, yeah. They're looking for that single governing force that connects the personal adhyaja to the physical adhikuta, to the systemic adhidaiva, trying to see how those concurrently growing parts ultimately fit together.
Okay, let's bring this back down to earth a bit. From the philosophical heights to the very practical. How does this wide-angle, generalist view actually drive innovation? Real, tangible stuff in the modern world.
Well, the generalist's core strength here is synthesis, right? It's about fusing things from different disciplines that maybe don't seem related at first glance.
And Pixar comes up again as a prime example.
It really is such a great case study. Their big technical breakthroughs, the stuff that made their movies possible early on, they weren't usually just flashes of genius in one single field like computer science alone.
It was more about the mix.
It was about assembling different kinds of thinkers, computer scientists, sure, but also artists, mathematicians, storytellers, and then creating an environment where they could work together, often with a lot of autonomy, but also under intense pressure.
Can you give an example, like one of those core tools?
Sure. Think about texture mapping. It sounds really basic now, maybe?
Yeah, putting a pattern on a 3D object.
Right. Wrapping a 2D pattern, like wood grain or the pattern on Buzz Lightyear's suit, onto a complex, curved 3D computer model. That was a huge hurdle.
And required blending art and code.
Exactly. And then there's the Z-buffer.
Z-buffer. Okay, what's that?
So for a programmer, it's essentially a piece of data assigned to every pixel on the screen. It tells the computer how far away that point is from the camera, its depth, or Z-coordinate.
Why is that important?
Before the Z-buffer, computers had a really hard time with overlapping objects. If you had a character standing in front of a wall, the computer might accidentally draw the wall on top of the character in some places.
Major visual glitches.
Huge glitches. The Z-buffer solved this visibility problem by giving every pixel a depth value. The computer could then easily figure out which object was closer and should be drawn on top.
Okay, but why is that a generalist innovation? It still sounds like clever programming.
Because it required synthesizing 2 different kinds of problems. You had the problem of perception. How does a human eye understand depth and occlusion? And you had the computational problem, how can a machine efficiently calculate these spatial relationships for millions of pixels?
So it connected human vision science with computer graphics algorithms.
Precisely. It wasn't just code. It was code informed by understanding perception. And the result, the Z-buffer, is so fundamental, it's now built into basically every graphics chip in phones, consoles, computers. It came from combining elements.
And Catmull also stressed something else critical for this kind of innovation, didn't he? The need to protect the new idea.
Oh, absolutely vital. That new idea, whether it's a movie concept or a tech breakthrough like the Z buffer, it's incredibly fragile at the start.
Why fragile?
Because the whole organizational system, the status quo, is almost always tilted to favor the incumbent. The established way of doing things, the profitable product line, the existing processes,
Inertia.
massive inertia. So management, especially generalist leaders who see the bigger picture, have to actively step in and defend that new challenging idea. Give it breathing room, resources, protection, long enough for it to find its footing and prove its worth.
They have to see the potential that the specialists focused on the current system might miss.
Exactly. They understand the whole ecosystem well enough to know when to intervene, to nurture something non-obvious that could be a huge long-term win.
This connects really well to that concept of multipliers versus diminishers in leadership.
It does, perfectly. Multipliers operate from a kind of default generalist assumption, don't they?
How s-
Their focus isn't on showcasing what they know, it's on figuring out how to know what others know.
Tapping into the whole team's intelligence.
Right. Their underlying belief is, hey, with enough smart people looking at this from different angles, we can figure it out. They actively pull insights from everyone.
Even the quiet junior person working late.
Especially them sometimes. They try to leverage every relevant perspective, and the research backs this up. Multipliers get something like twice the capability out of their teams compared to diminishers.
And diminishers are the opposite. Narrower focus.
Yeah, diminishers tend to filter input through what they personally understand or value. They often shut down ideas that don't fit their framework. The multiplier, though, acts like the organization's synthesis engine, pulling diverse inputs together.
But synthesis isn't always about adding new things. Sometimes, the generalist view requires strategic withdrawal, right? Especially under extreme pressure.
Definitely. We saw some dramatic examples of this in the tech industry back in the 90s when competitive forces just exploded like that 10x increase Andy Grove talked about.
IBM's big pivot comes to mind.
Classic case. IBM was bleeding money trying to compete in application software. It was a specialized battle they were losing.
So what did the generalist leaders do?
They looked at the whole strategic landscape and realized IBM's unique strength, its core value, lay elsewhere. They made the incredibly tough call to strategically withdraw from application software.
And shifted resources where?
Aggressively focused on middleware, the software that connects other software, and, crucially, on their global services unit. And that services unit, it exploded.
Why?
Because it addressed a systemic, constant need helping companies manage complex IT rather than just selling a specific product that could become obsolete. It was a brilliant generalist move.
And Lotus had a similar moment, facing Microsoft in the spreadsheet wars.
Yeah, they were getting crushed by Excel. Trying to win that specific battle head-on was futile.
So they pivoted too.
They committed basically everything to Lotus Notes, focusing on group computing and collaboration. They essentially created a whole new market category where Microsoft wasn't dominant yet.
Again, looking beyond the immediate fight to a different strategic landscape.
That's the essence of the generalist perspective in a crisis. You look past the fire right in front of you, the shrinking core business problem, and scan the horizon for the long-term strategic opportunities.
It reminds me of that finding from Good to Great. The best companies put their best people on.
Their best opportunities, not their biggest problems.
Right. Managing problems just keeps you from failing, makes you good.
But seizing opportunities, building on strengths, that's the only path to becoming truly great. And only a generalist eye scanning the whole field can reliably spot those hidden opportunities.
Speaking of hidden things and potential pitfalls, we should touch on cognitive biases. Generalists, almost by definition, ought to be better at spotting these mental traps because they're considering more angles, right?
You'd hope so. And Daniel Kahneman's work highlights a really common one: insensitivity to sample size.
Okay, explain that one. How does it trap narrow thinking?
It's a classic bias where our intuition gets probability wrong. We tend to be swayed more by the proportion in a sample rather than the actual size of the sample.
Can you give us a quick example? Make it concrete.
Sure. Imagine you have two big urns filled with red and white balls. You don't know the mix in either. From urn A, you draw a small sample, 4 red balls and 1 white ball.
Okay, 80% red in that small sample.
Right. From urn B, you draw a larger sample, 12 red balls and 8 white balls.
Okay, that's 60% red, but a much bigger sample, 20 balls versus 5.
Exactly. Now, Kahneman found that many people intuitively feel sample A, the 4-to-1 ratio, is much stronger evidence that the urn is mostly red.
Because the proportion, 80%, is higher.
Yes, they're dominated by the proportion, even though the small sample size makes that 80% figure statistically less reliable than the 60% derived from the much larger sample in B.
So the narrow thinker zooms in on the ratio.
And ignores the crucial structural factor, the sample size, the amount of data. This leads to what Kahneman called conservatism, underestimating the impact of evidence when the sample is large, but the proportion isn't extreme, or overestimating it with small, flashy samples.
And the general.
The generalist, ideally, is trained to consider all the relevant variables, including the reliability and scope of the data itself. They should be better equipped to override that intuitive bias and make a more statistically sound judgment.
All right, let's pivot to another high-stakes area.
Yeah.
Leadership and conflict. Most workplaces seem to strive for harmony, smooth sailing. But the generalist view, based on our sources, suggests conflict isn't just inevitable, it's actually necessary.
It's essential for systemic health. That's the argument. Think of it like friction. You need it for motion. Or like weather.
Weather. How so?
Brad Bird, the director at Pixar, used this metaphor of the ecology of creativity. He argued that leaders need to see conflict as vital. You need all the seasons, including the storms.
You can't just have sunny days.
If it's always sunny, nothing grows, right? The soil dries out, the ecosystem stagnates and dies. Conflict, disagreement, debate, that's the storm. It's how ideas get tested, challenged, refined. How the weak ideas get weeded out and the strong ones survive contact with reality.
It's intellectual natural selection, in a way.
That's a good way to think about it. So, management's job isn't to suppress disagreement, to maintain harmony.
It's the opposite.
It's to actively mine for dissent, to intentionally bring conflicting opinions out into the open. That's how you foster a true meritocracy of ideas, where the best concepts win, regardless of who proposed them.
So achieving balance in an organization isn't about finding some perfect static equilibrium.
No, not at all. It's not like balancing a statue perfectly still. It's a dynamic response to a constantly changing environment. Think of an athlete balancing while moving, or a surfer constantly adjusting to the wave.
The balance is in the motion, in the adjustments.
Exactly. And those adjustments are often driven by healthy internal conflict and debate.
Okay, but leading that kind of environment requires incredible confidence and security from the leader, doesn't it?
Tremendous intellectual security. It goes way beyond just being willing to change your mind.
What does it demand?
It demands the leader be genuinely willing to be proven wrong, and not just willing, but actively encouraging subordinates to push back, to argue longer and more loudly if they truly believe the leader is making a mistake.
Longer and louder. That sounds intense.
It is, but the signal it sends is crucial. The goal here isn't for the latter to win the argument. The goal is to get to the correct outcome for the organization.
So if a subordinate proves the leader wrong,
the leader's reaction shouldn't be anger or defensiveness. According to someone like Kim Scott in Radical Candor, the leader should almost feel the subordinate failed slightly by not convincing them sooner. The ultimate responsibility for synthesizing the debate and making the right call still rests with the leader, but they need that robust challenge.
that distinction between the immediate goal, winning an argument, and the overall goal, best outcome, really echoes the military distinction between tactics and strategy, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Clausewitz was very clear on this separation.
What was his take?
He defined tactics as the art of using troops in battle, preparing for and engaging in specific fights. It's localized, dealing with the immediate physical confrontation.
So things like reconnaissance, setting up outposts, partisan actions,
Yeah.
put those under tactics.
Yes, what he called small war, all firmly within tactics.
Okay, so if troop movements and specific fights are tactical, what constitutes strategy for Clausewitz?
Strategy is the higher level. It's the art of combining those individual battles, those tactical engagements, into a coherent whole, a campaign designed to achieve the overall objective of the war.
The generalist operates at the strategic level.
Precisely. Seeing the entire map, the whole campaign, understanding that sometimes a tactical loss might be necessary for a larger strategic gain or vice versa.
And sometimes that strategic view dictates tactics that look completely insane from a purely tactical, narrow perspective.
Sun Tzu gives great examples of this. He advised sometimes placing your army in deadly peril or desperate straits.
Why on earth would you do that?
To force survival. The classic story is the General Han Sen. He famously positioned his troops with their backs right up against a river.
Tactically suicidal, no retreat possible.
Exactly. His own officers probably thought he was crazy. The enemy commanders certainly didn't appear. They laughed, thinking victory was guaranteed.
But what happened?
The soldiers, seeing absolutely no escape route, fought with unbelievable desperation. Pure survival instinct kicked in, and they won a decisive victory.
So Han Xin wasn't making a tactical blunder.
No, he was making a calculated strategic move. He understood the psychology of his troops and the likely overconfidence of the enemy. He risked the specific tactical situation to guarantee the strategic outcome, winning the battle through forced commitment. The generalist sees the interplay of factors beyond the immediate battlefield. Taking that kind of calculated risk, especially if it involves surprise or deception, must require absolute control over information beforehand.
Crucial. Clausewitz emphasized this for small war operations too. Secrecy is paramount.
Who should know the plan?
Only those who absolutely have to know just before execution. And interestingly, he notes this isn't just about preventing leaks to the enemy.
What else is it about?
It's about guarding against accidental disclosure from simple human nature, what he calls common human loquacity. People just like to talk.
So keeping secrets is hard, even among allies.
Very hard. The strategic knowledge, the comprehensive plan needs protection because its power often lies in the enemy not having that wide-angle view. It allows the generalist commander to use surprise effectively.
Okay, let's bring this wide-angle view to maybe the most complex system we deal with. Governance, ethics, how we organize society itself. The generalist perspective seems critical here for setting goals that actually serve the whole community, not just one powerful part. Aristotle basically made this mandatory for his ideal state, the polis. He argued very directly that a state cannot possibly be happy unless, as he put it, some, most, or all of its parts are happy.
You can't have a thriving city built on widespread misery.
Right. It seems obvious, maybe, but it was quite radical. It meant the ruler's own success and happiness were directly tied to the well-being of the entire system, not just their own faction.
So the goal of the best constitution for Aristotle.
It had to be a structure where anyone, any citizen participating might do best and live a genuinely happy, flourishing life. This forces the ruler to constantly consider the common benefit, the overall excellence of the citizens. It demands that breadth of vision.
And we see a similar broad, systemic approach in Cicero's discussion of personal ethics, specifically about who you should help.
Yeah, his advice on moral duty is fascinating. He says if you're deciding who to assist, you should generally prefer helping an upright, self-respecting poor person over someone who's rich and influential but maybe less virtuous.
Why? What was his reasoning? It seems counterintuitive if you're looking for immediate influence.
His reasoning was purely generalist, focused on the long-term health of the social system. He argued the favor, the help, is better invested with good people.
Better invested.
Meaning they'll remember it, they'll honor the obligation, they'll likely pay it forward in some way. Plus, he added, defending the poor and humble actually prepares a defense for the inevitable hardships, the exigencies that can affect anyone regardless of status.
So it reinforces the whole social fabric.
Exactly. And Cicero concluded that justice, this broad fairness, is the real foundation of lasting reputation and praise, not just temporary wealth or power. It's a long-term systemic view of ethical investment.
This concern for the whole, for the common good, feels very central to Rousseau as well, particularly his idea of the general will.
Very central. For Rousseau, the general will wasn't just the sum of everyone's private desires or interests. It was something distinct, aimed solely at the common good.
And he had that romantic image of peasants making wise decisions.
Yeah, peasants gathered under an oak tree, regulating state affairs simply and effectively. He contrasted that with what he saw as the corrupting political subtleties and specialized arguments of more sophisticated nations, which he thought obscured the common good.
He really pushed this generalist idea of shared responsibility to an extreme, didn't he? With his views on sovereignty.
He absolutely did. He argued that sovereignty, the ultimate authority in the state, is indivisible and inalienable. Meaning you can't break it up into specialized pieces and you can't give it away or delegate it permanently. For Rousseau, elected deputies weren't true representatives holding power. They were just agents of the people.
Agents?
Yeah, temporary stewards. And crucially, he claimed any law that the entire populace hadn't ratified in person was null and void, invalid.
Wow. That's radically democratic and anti-specialist. It puts all the responsibility back on everyone.
It's the ultimate rejection of a small, specialized legislative class holding the real power. It demands total general participation.
Now, Machiavelli, maybe coming from a different angle, also offered a pragmatic generalist view on how rulers should maintain power, right? By balancing interests.
Very pragmatic, yes.
Uh,
He observed that a prince who gains power through popular favor tends to keep it more easily than one who relies solely on the nobles.
why is that?
Because the people, as a whole, are generally more inclined to obey and less likely to challenge the prince's authority directly compared to ambitious nobles.
Hmm.
However, Machiavelli knew you couldn't just ignore the nobles.
So how do you manage that inherent conflict between the powerful few and the numerous populace?
He pointed to well-ordered states, using France as his example, that established an arbiter.
An independent body.
Yes, like
Yeah.
the French parliament of his time. Its function was to act as a check on the ambitions of the nobility while simultaneously protecting the people from noble overreach.
So it balanced the system.
Exactly. It was a generalist, structural solution to manage the constant tension. It allowed the king to avoid the blame, the reproach, of siding too obviously with either the nobles or the people, thus keeping the whole system more stable. It acknowledged and balanced all the necessary parts.
And finally, this challenge of balancing different levels and interests was right at the heart of the American founding, wasn't it? The Federalist Papers really grapple with this complexity.
They absolutely do. They highlight the unique mixed nature of the government they were proposing. It wasn't purely national nor purely federal in the old sense.
How do they describe its foundation?
They explained it was founded by the people, acting collectively, yes. But the Constitution was ratified by the people organized within their distinct and independent states. That made the ratification itself a federal act, an agreement among sovereign entities.
A dual nature from the start.
A dual nature that meant the system could never be run effectively by a simple, centralized specialist authority. It required navigating different levels of power.
And this is reflected in specific mechanisms, like taxation,
Taxation is a perfect example. They established concurrent jurisdiction.
meaning shared power between states and the federal government.
Shared authority, yes. Both levels could tax citizens. This wasn't designed to be neat. It was designed to force coordination.
How so?
Because if both entities are taxing the same people, mutual interest, negotiation, and finding common ground become necessary to avoid overburdening the populace or creating conflict. It's a built-in generalist mechanism forcing coordination between potentially competing specialized interests. It acknowledges that no single authority controls the whole. Leaders have to work across boundaries.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Ancient philosophy, digital animation, military campaigns, constitutional design.
A wide range, fittingly.
A wide range indeed. And the unifying thread seems crystal clear, doesn't it? True effectiveness, whether you're launching a Pixar movie, winning the war, or governing a nation, it doesn't seem to come from just narrow expertise.
No, it comes from the ability to connect the dots, to manage those conflicting viewpoints dynamically, like Brad Bird's storms.
And applying that strategic, generalized thinking, seeing the Adhidava, the big picture, to very specific, complex situations, the Adhiguta.
The generalist is the system integrator. That feels right. Constantly weaving together the different threads.
And for you, listening to this, thinking about your own path, this offers a really crucial insight into personal effectiveness, doesn't it?
I think so. Stephen Covey talked about this journey. He said, gaining knowledge quickly and thoroughly means first achieving independence, moving away from being dependent on circumstances or what others dictate.
But independence isn't the end goal.
No, that's just the foundation. For Covey, real effectiveness, achieving your biggest goals, lies in interdependence.
Interdependence, meaning working with others.
Meaning the willingness and ability to combine your own focused thinking with the best thinking and capabilities of others. That generalist act of reaching out, synthesizing, collaborating, that's how you tap into the vast resources and potential of the entire network, the whole system.
It's that ability to shift perspective again, to see the whole ecology, like you said, needing the storms, not just the sunshine.
Or moving from the frustrating specific problem right in front of you to identifying the underlying constant, the principle that needs addressing. That's what separates the guide from the follower, maybe.
So here's a final thought to maybe chew on, connecting back to military strategy but applying it more broadly.
Okay.
Clausewitz talked about the Landsturm, the People's War, a kind of decentralized citizen defense force, inherently agile, not specialized, like a professional army.
Right, the militia or partisans?
His advice was, if this force gets overrun by the professionals, it should never try to stand and fight a tactical defense it can't win.
What should it do instead?
It should disperse, melt away, and continue the defense through surprise attacks, ambushes, harassment, prioritize strategic agility and survival over holding ground.
Use its generalist, adaptable nature as a strength.
Exactly. So the question for you is, if change is constant in your field, if overwhelming competitive forces are always threatening to swamp your current area of expertise, what does that land sperm principle mean for your career, for your organization?
How do you cultivate that strategic agility?
Yeah. How do you proactively build that wide-angle lens needed to see the next wave coming, to be ready to disperse, adapt, and maybe counter with surprise, rather than just waiting for the specialized ground you currently hold to become irrelevant?